G'day and welcome to another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups. On this episode, we're going to be doing rear brakes on a Hyundai Veloster. Alright, first step, jack up the car. Alright, next step, we're going to remove the wheels. Don't forget your earmuffs. Alright, so we're going to remove the caliper bracket first. There's two 14mm bolts at the back, so I've got a standard ratchet we're going to crack it with, and then we're going to grab our electric Ryobi ratchet to remove the bolts. Once we've removed the caliper off to the side, we are then going to use a cable tie to move it out of the way. That way we're not going to leave pressure hanging on the brake lines. Once we've done that, there are two Phillips head screws to remove the disc. We're then going to remove and replace the disc. Alright, next step, put a cable tie through one of these bolt holes and then just up around the brake line just to keep it out of the way. Alright, next step is to remove these two Phillips head and replace the disc. Alright, so here's Tomo's tech tip. Sometimes you go to remove screws and they won't come out without using an impact screwdriver. If you don't have one on you, all you need is a hammer and a screwdriver, couple of good hits, and then the screw will come straight out. Now, it's important that when you get new rotors, that when you take them out of the plastic, they are covered in a little bit of a grease film. So all we're going to do is get a little bit of brake cleaner. We're just going to give it a nice light film around the outside. Grab a nice clean rag, give it a wipe. The reason they put grease or even oil on the rotors in storage or even in transport is to make sure that they don't rust. Once the rotor's nice and clean, we can then refit it. Now the two locating screws here, as you can see, they are off center, so the rotor will only go on one way. Once the rotor's on, put the two screws back on, then we start refitting the caliper. So next step we're going to do is we're going to cut the cable tie and refit the brake caliper. Before we refit the brake caliper, we want to remove the brake pads to make sure that it goes on nice and easy. Once we've refitted the caliper, we are then going to remove the caliper from the bracket and push the piston back. Once they're done up, don't forget to double check the tension of the bolts. Alright, so next step is to remove the caliper slide bolts, which is what holds the caliper to the bracket. All we're going to be doing is just removing the 14mm underneath. Hopefully, by removing the one, we can then pivot it up out of the way and fit the new brake pads. And then off she comes. So we can let that one hang there. That's no problem at all. Now, you want to pull the caliper slides out one at a time. Grab a clean rag, clean it up, either get some brake lubricant paste or even just a bit of high temp bearing grease, and just apply a little bit of paste on the end. Give it a light smear. Now you don't need to cover the entire slide in grease because as you push it in, it will then slide all the way down. Refit the slide and do the same to the other one. This ensures that the brakes are able to be sliding properly on the caliper slides and they don't seize. Failure to do so will cause premature wear of your brakes. Alright, so next step we're going to do is just grab a drain tin. We're going to slide it underneath and we're just going to give the brake caliper nice clean, just to get rid of any brake dust. Now, some brake pads used to be made out of asbestos, so it is important that even though we live in 2022, nothing is guaranteed that it is or is not made out of asbestos. So just be careful when you're doing this sort of job. Never assume that it is a safe material to work with, but just be vigilant that even if it is, that you don't breathe these particles in. So we have our new set of brake pads. As you can see, they are different. This one has a tab on the inside, whereas this one doesn't. Now, the one with the tab is going to go on the inside, so where the piston is on the caliper. The one without the tab is going to go on the outside. Sometimes they are labelled, sometimes they aren't. If you're ever unsure, make sure you look at the original pads that came out and which order, and then reinstall them the same way. Now, most conventional calipers slide in and out. With a rear handbrake setup that is attached to the caliper, it has a mechanism inside there that as you pull it, the piston winds in and out. So what we need to do, we can't just compress the piston back in the caliper like we would on the front. What we need to be doing is using a rear caliper piston tool. So these can be obtained from any good local parts shop, such as Repco or even Super Cheap Auto. So we grab our attachment and the tool. We're then going to slide it inside, line it up with the grooves, and then make our adjustment for the tool. Once it's on there, we're then just going to wind the piston back. And once it's pushed all the way back, remove the tool. Now, another Tomo's tech tip. You want to make sure that the boot around the outside of the piston doesn't tear whatsoever. If it does, it's going to let brake dust, road grime, dirt, anything inside there, and it's going to destroy the seal, causing the caliper piston to seize. So if it is damaged, make sure you renew it. If it isn't, you can then reinstall the caliper. Start the bolts by hand and then tighten them up using a ratchet or a spanner. As always, double check it. Now, before we go ahead and start the other side and refit the wheel, we're going to get a little bit of copper paste. Now, we're just going to apply this to the threads. That way, when we reinstall the wheel nuts, it's going to be easier to go on, and it will help with the removal process the next time the wheel gets removed. All right, time to refit the wheel. Make sure you always start the nuts by hand. Grab your earmuffs, grab the rattle gun, let's tighten it up. Now, I've deliberately set the rattle gun to the lowest torque setting, so it sounded like it was running out of battery, but it was the lowest torque setting of the gun. That way, when you bring it down, we can ensure that they're not over tight, and we can double check it with a torque wrench. Let's get to doing the other side.
Don't wanna sleep in, cause I got something to prove. I gotta take what I hate and finally make a move. I think of you and all the shit you don't do. Well, I'ma make hella sure that I don't become you. I have no regrets, yeah, I'll tie up my chest. I'll never forget what it's like to be in debt. Been stabbed in the back bed, I'll show you what happens. Pass me the mic and I'll show you with action. I feel this pain, you already know. Turn that to gains, let my money show. I've got these things that I can't let go. Watch me turn this life into something that you could never own. I feel this pain, you already know. Turn that to gains, let my money show. I've got these things that I can't let go. Watch me turn this life into something that you could never own. So fight and die for the things you know you a human being. Cover them with tattoos so you can't see. Knew it from the start, you had problems with me and the things I could be, I just wish I had seen. I feel this pain, you already know. Turn that to gains, let my money show.
Alright, so now we've completed the brake job on both sides. Both the wheel nuts are tight. We're then going to take it off the jack stands, use a torque wrench, double check the wheels, and we're going to take it for a drive and bed in the brakes.
Turn that to gains, let my money show. I've got these things that I can't let go. Watch me turn this life into something that you can never own. So fight and fight.
Right, so like I always say, on a twist type torque wrench, make sure you always undo it when you're finished to make sure that the spring inside there doesn't get out of tension and you don't get incorrect torque settings. Right, so now we've torqued up the wheels, everything's completed. The last thing you need to do before you drive the car is make sure that the brake fluid level is adjusted correctly once you've pumped your foot on the brake several times. Make sure as well that you don't put your foot all the way to the ground on the brake pedal. That way you won't overextend the master cylinder piston and you won't do any damage to it. So what we're going to do to bed them in, we're going to bring the car up to about 60 kilometers an hour and apply some decent force. Bring it back down to about 40 and then do that a couple of times. Once we've done that about 3 or 4 times, we're then going to increase the speed to about 80 kilometers an hour and then we're going to bring it back down to about 60. Once you've bed the brakes in and you're happy with it, make sure you take it easy for the first 500 kilometers and ensure that there's no smoke or noises coming from the brakes. So that's it guys, that's how you replace the rear brake pads on a Hyundai Veloster. Don't forget, when you're finished, make sure you adjust the brake fluid level as well as tightening the wheel nuts using a torque wrench. Thanks for watching guys, we'll see you right here on Tomo's Tune Ups.